And welcome, one and all, if anyone ever actually hears this, that's to be determined, to Voyager Please, a hateful voyage through the Delta Quadrant. My name is Joseph, and my co-host Peter and I are looking very much forward to going episode by episode through the seminal television program Star Trek Voyager, for better or for worse.
Looking forward to is a gross exaggeration. I will say up front that Voyager was on the bottom of my list for topics, Star Trek shows for us to watch. My card was thrown in the hat of actually jumping into the Orville.
I've only watched one episode of the Orville so far, and I can already say with confidence it's probably a better Star Trek television show than Voyager. But that said, I think Voyager presents, you and I are long-term Star Trek fans, and we have some background in podcasting on top, and we've wanted to do this for a long time. And we wound up picking Voyager, I think, because it provides us so much material.
Yeah, my strength is definitely in Next Gen. I would say I'm a Next Gen whiz kid. The other Star Trek properties, not so hot, and I would say Voyager is probably the one I've seen the least of. So a good opportunity here to cover some ground I've never explored before, but I know damn well this is going to be a bumpy ride, and I'm going to be real mad when we start getting to these bad episodes, Joe. I'm going to hold you personally accountable.
Granted, they are coming.
I'll tell you, it's a different world, that is for damn sure. Before we go any further, I'd like to throw our disclaimer in there. If you found your way to us for a Star Trek podcast, welcome. If you found your way to us for some comedy, double welcome. If you have found your way to us for a loving and respectful dissertation on the Voyager property, turn back. We're certainly coming at this from a direction of two guys who love Star Trek and who can talk a lot about Star Trek. But more importantly, we're coming after this for some below-the-belt punching to the Voyager groin area. I believe that would be the main deflector dish region. This is going to be I would say we're going to rate this R.
Yeah, well,
I plan on throwing some F-bombs.
I would say rated R for sure, because we're going to talk a whole ration of shit about all of the stupid 90s television tropes.
Yeah, if you're driving to your in-laws' place and it's going to be a 2-hour drive and the kids are in the car, this probably isn't the right podcast for you.
It's January of 1995.
Hey, I'm in high school.
I am...
Where'd all this acne come from?
I am in junior high still, and it's hard to conceive of it now. But this was a period in time when Star Trek, when it came to like pop culture ascendancy among science fiction, like franchises, it was ascendant. It was the big dog. This is prequel movies for Star Wars outlets, special edition releases. Star Trek had a huge success with TNG. It had wrapped just the year before, got nominated for an Emmy for Best Series, which for a syndicated show like that never happens. There was DS9 had launched 2 years prior. It was starting to
hit its stride for sure.
Yeah, it started its climb up, and Star Trek was BFD. It was a big fucking deal, and Voyager was the next kind of stepping stone in the Star Trek franchise that was really growing in popularity. The TNG movies were coming. Generations was going to be coming out soon. All this other stuff was happening, and Voyager enters the scene.
Voyager's big deal, too, was that it got back to the classic formula. I never really sunk my teeth into Deep Space Nine, and I think there was a resentment to a certain degree that it was a static environment. You were on the space station, and it started exploring some very dark subject matter that strayed far from the the Gene Roddenberry vision. So getting back in the captain's chair with, the nacelles behind you and boldly going was an important return back to the original formula.
Right, and Berman wasn't all that. Rick Berman, the executive producer of kind of the Star Trek canon at that time, for the majority of its period post Roddenberry to the end of Enterprise, wasn't all that involved with DS9. He was super in on TNG, and then he was super in on Voyager, and it's probably why DS9 managed to separate itself a little bit in terms of its tone. And Voyager was intended to be more a show in the sort of Roddenberry part of the canon. The problem for the show was that, as we're going to discover almost immediately, Next Generation was incredibly popular, not just because of the Star Trek formula or how the writing or the quality of the directing or the effects. It was as good a show as it was because of the quality of the actors on it.
And at certain times, the lack of quality in the actors, the right kind of bad. Next Gen clawed itself out of the grave like some sort of George Romero zombie. The franchise had been dead for so long, and really, Next Gen started at square one and focused heavy on world building. Would Next Gen ever have floated in today's TV environment? Absolutely not. I think past
canceled episode 3 for sure.
Episode 2, man, the Tchaikovsky virus Naked Now is just miserable, and that's that's a big thing. I've been dragging my wife by the hair through this journey of Star Trek, and whenever bringing someone new into the world, the question you always have to ask yourself is, where do I start? Because season 1 was so bad, and trying to get someone excited about a show with season 1 is a miserable experience. Now, if you're looking for a comedy podcast, season 1 is gold.
Yeah, and I think the important thing, though, is that TNG managed to pull itself out of there. And it pulled itself out of there because Patrick Stewart's like cheat codes for acting. I mean, he's
Sure.
a good enough actor that he makes bad dialogue sound great. And,
Yeah.
When you've got TV writers, sometimes you need somebody who can do that. And then in DS9... they had better writers. I mean, Ron Moore really took a bigger role in that show. Ron Moore, later of Battlestar Galactica fame, he can write.
Hey.
And so even though DS9 didn't have as many great actors on it, it had better writing, so it kind of balanced out. Voyager, Jerry Taylor and Micah Pillar are not Ron Moore, and Rick Berman has his own problems when it comes to being a little too close to Roddenberry's best and worst instincts. And so it didn't have the super strong writing core that DS9 might have. And then the actors they got were really hit or miss.
I'm going to tell you right now, the title I think we need to have
for this episode?
for this episode, because this is what this episode literally was for me, was a goddamn shit show. All right. So we started discussing about doing this podcast. It was originally supposed to be a TNG podcast we discussed how many years ago?
I'd say 6 years ago.
6 years ago, and only now have we finally realized the idea that we had come up with. So I had to get myself excited about the idea of going in and watching this, and really, really stoked the fire to give a shit about this series, and get myself excited. My wife got so mad because I dragged us to 3 or 4 different half-price books on a quest to try and find a spiral-bound Star Trek notebook, ideally a Voyager one.
That is dedication.
Dude, I'm sitting.
That's dedication to a detail no one else is gonna fucking see, too.
She's like, "What do you care? Just grab one of these other." I almost grabbed a First Order Star Wars composition book, but I was like, "No, I need a spiral." And she's like, "What do you care? No one's ever gonna see this." And I'm like, "We're talking about potentially a very big investment of my life, and if I'm gonna sit here and watch 7 seasons of 45 or 52-minute episodes. I need to have something coming out of this that I can put on the shelf and say, that's hours of my life.
Here's a memento of all the time that finite time on this earth I wasted watching this terrible television show.
To no one's surprise, I was not able to find any sort of a Star Trek notebook. So
not even Discovery.
Yes,
I guess that's not really Star Trek, but
and it's certainly not going to be on Walmart shelves. Let me tell you that. So and I'm going to drag my wife into this with me too, because I need someone there sitting on the couch keeping me sane while this is going on. So we were supposed to watch it on the 3rd, and then there was a little fight in the house. So instead we started watching it on the 4th, finally get the family locked in to start dragging them through this. And I got the baby down at my feet, and all of a sudden we got to start pumping the warp brakes here, because I looked down, and I think this was kind of an omen of what was to come. As I look at my sock, the baby is down at my feet crawling around, and I'm like, oh my God, the baby is bleeding. There is blood all over my sock. So I quickly pick the baby up. My wife pauses it, and we go to look, and I'm turning the baby around looking, and there is no wounds on her. I'm like, what the hell? Back in the black and white days, these vampire movies, they would use chocolate syrup instead of blood.
right.
Because in black and white and dim lighting, it looked just like blood.
Mm-hmm.
So there the baby was in the dimly lit floor. What I thought was blood was, in fact, baby poop that had squirted out of her diaper. My sock, my jeans, the carpeting, my work shirt, all of the baby, because I had been spinning her around frantically looking for a wound, now covered in shit. So Star Trek Voyage had to stop for me to scrub poop out of the carpet, as I contemplated what I was doing with my life and should I go any further.
I'm not a spiritual man, but someone is trying to tell you something.
Yes, they were, as I quickly came to realize.
I mean, the episode starts with a text crawl, which is always always strong. It's always just a quick 3-paragraph text crawl to tell us about the world's worst terrorists, the Maquis. So,
dude, right off the bat, like the text crawl starts, and immediately I pause the TV and start furiously writing in my notebook. And my wife's like, "What?" And I'm like, "This is going to be a long night. Just chill out." So there you are at your Star Trek, and how do you open your brand new franchise? Well, with a Star Wars grade text crawl, of course.
Now, I mean, DS9 did the same thing, but they framed it.
Oh, did they?
They did, but they framed it in essentially the unseen battle of Wolf 359. So it's a text crawl to be like, "Hey, this is what's about to happen," and then you see the Battle of Wolf 359 from Sisko's perspective. Which made sense because it's establishing something we've already seen in a prior show. And so they did another text crawl to set the scene for this first shot, except this isn't something we've seen before. These are all new people. We have no context for any of this, aside from the fact that they're the Maquis, who are the worst terrorists of all kind. Like, why the fuck? The Maquis are a terrible idea. They always were. The whole idea behind them is that they're these terrorists that are angry that the planets they used to live on belong to the Cardassians now, right? Like, that's their concept.
I believe that the text crawl specifically labeled the Maquis as unhappy. They're not angry, they're just unhappy.
The 24th century has unlimited everything, right? Yeah. It's a utopian society. These guys could have just moved to any other planet, had whatever they wanted. There's no loss at all aside from pride and moving from the planet they're on. But they're like, nah, never mind that. We're just going to be terrorists instead and live in poverty and risk our lives over real estate that does not matter because we have super technology. It's the stupidest fucking thing. They should not exist.
And the Maquis was a concept that's been played with heavily through Next Gen and DS9. So I mean, it's a known quantity. There have been some opportunities, I think, to have some Maquis stories that matter. What was the episode of TNG where Picard it's the one where Wesley goes off and becomes a a demigod.
Right, with the Traveler, yeah, and that was a similar. I mean, they started the whole Maquis thing in TNG and set it up.
Was that a Maquis essentially outpost? Because the some sort of Native American tribe was there, and then they started giving Picard shit because one of his ancestors made a move during American colonization or something. Did they actually end up being Maquis?
That episode, in a large part, kind of describes the Maquis beef with the Federation, like that they're being told to move. In fact, Chakotay, who's the very first person we see, very first character we experience, his whole backstory is that his tribe lived on a planet that was going to fall under Cardassian control. So, sort of
was it that Picard? Was it that Picard traveler colony? Because I thought that would have been a pretty cool link up.
I don't think they ever linked that directly, but I guess we'll see as we go.
Why would you squander that opportunity? So many stupid decisions, man. So you get through the text crawl, and then you see another stupid scene. So you've got forgive me, I'm not familiar. What's that Cardassian warship
Gaylord class?
That's right, Gaylord class.
Yeah.
And it's going ham on what looks like some sort of sci-fi original fighter jet.
It's like beating up on like the 94 Trans Am that your white trash neighbor drives.
Right.
Yeah.
And immediately I'm like, so you got a Galore class heavy cruiser, which would give the Enterprise D a run for the money on numerous occasions in TNG. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the last big war that the Federation was in was the Federation Cardassian War, right? That was Benjamin Maxwell, that whole Miles O'Brien. Like, there was a lot of bad blood still in the Federation towards the Cardassians because this was such a fresh wound.
Yeah, they spend enough time kind of harping on that. It's pretty well known, I think, to anyone that had a casual acquaintance with Star Trek at this point.
So, you've got the Federation, which at the beginning of TNG was like kind of nebulous. The role of the Federation in the universe, sometimes they seem like they're this big omnipresent force. Sometimes it seems like they're just, shoulder to shoulder with the Romulans and the Klingons, and apparently the Cardassians. If the Cardassian Empire gave them such a hard time during that war, you got all these big Federation ships, these Galores tearing up. Here's the Galore versus a Firebird from the 80s, and they just can't fucking win, man.
They just can't quite blow up this Trans Am. Like, they just need him to get him on the freeway, and the fucking catalytic converter and that thing's gonna blow. But here they are, they're chasing these guys. The first shot we see inside the Trans Am is Chakotay. My wife, I took my cues from you. I decided that if I'm going on this journey, I would like company to preserve my sanity. So my wife and I are watching this, and his line delivery is so flat in this crisis situation. My wife looks over and is like, please tell me he's one of the people who dies in this episode. I was like, oh, baby. I got bad news for you.
So two things are going on here. I'm watching this on Netflix, right? First of all, I got the big black bars on the sides, and I'm immediately reminded, Voyager's not important enough to have gotten the HD revamp yet. This is going to be
They're
miserable.
probably not going to even do an HD revamp of DS9. So Voyager is absolutely going to be left out in the cold.
Well, and us along with it. So I got these huge black bars, and it just looks like crap on my TV. And what looks even worse than this low-resolution bullshit are the clothes they got these guys wearing. If there's one thing Star Trek has always missed the mark on, it is trying to present the fashion of the future in any light other than complete disgusting puke fest.
I mean, it was some classic 1995 sci-fi clothing. I mean, like you said, it's not like Star Trek's ever done, quote, civilian clothes very well, but these guys look like lost waiters at a fucking rainforest cafe. These weird mismatched earth tones all over.
Ugh, it's like carpet burns for my eyes. Though the one guy, some jerk off in the background who would go on to have a very wicked, smoldering look of disgust at Tom Paris. He's one of their randos. I figured he was going to die in this episode, but he's back there with literally an umpire's protective chess piece.
Yeah, it's if there was an umpire at a baseball game in the Mad Max universe, it would have been him.
With some Fallout 4 thrown in there. Like, get the
You
hell
know
out
what's
of here,
funny
man.
about that random dude in the back you noticed? Who's like in the background as like the extra marquee guy in every like scene in this episode? That
That's the guy I'm talking
that
about.
dude is a constant extra for 7 seasons. Like he never talks, he never gets lines, but he's always like standing in the background somewhere.
I'm going to go ahead and say that's a relation to a producer or someone who has some juice over there.
We'll have to do research, but he is a consistent background extra through the years. So this is his first. He has a strong visual open with his Mad Max
I'm telling
Empire
you,
gear.
he's got like some umpire gear like flat out on there. How big you think? We're getting dragged down in the minutia here, but I mean, how many people could realistically be on that ship? Because I count 6.
I mean,
so it's interesting.
White trash, can fit like 12 people in one of those Trans Ams if they try hard. So if we're assuming that the Maquis are basically classed as white trash of the galaxy, you say it seats 6, maybe 18.
So they get lost in this nebulon cloud, blah blah blah, and then they jump into the opening.
Well, before that, we have to preface that they go into the Badlands, and which is this big like plasma storm
nebula storm
that has like Spawn the movie level effects. They're gonna make it, and then all of a sudden they just kind of get scanned by something, and then there's a white flash, and then they cut the title sequence. That's where we leave it. The title sequence for this show, I think, is probably my favorite among Star Trek. I know it doesn't have the classic musical themes from the original series or TNG or a narration, but visually, it's beautiful. It's well composed. I like the music overlay. It's really nice.
Here's what's always stood out to me, and I think it encapsulates a lot of Voyager and a lot of my complaints with it, when this thing initially came out. One of the ongoing jokes about Star Trek for me has always been, hey, look, we got this starship and we're supposed to be doing some stuff out there. Oh, hey, there's something weird and could be dangerous. Let's go fly through it. And I'm watching this, and they're flying through like gas clouds and rings around whatever, and the black hole and the firestorm.
They were showing off that they were doing CGI effects. That's what they were doing. It looked good for 1995. And hey, the Orville's opening is very similar. So
yes, it is. It's an important thing you've said here. This was pretty deep in the CGI territory. I don't know if they made any real practical models. And while it did, in a lot of times, look really sweet at the time, a lot of this CG does not hold up at all. And again, we're not coming into a series where we've got people that got to knock the rust off. This is 2 solid Trek products preceding it. All 7 series or 7 seasons of TNG, 2 seasons of DS9. Voyager's coming out like the baby of the family. And at this point, the family's really established itself, and babies, the third child, the youngest child, they're not driving the old 87 Buick Park Avenue that Grandpa wheeled down. Like, they're getting handed, like, Porsche keys. Like, this is a spoiled child coming in with, like, the table set and silver spoons ready to go.
I mean, yeah, when TNG started, there was, like, all these miniatures. Hell, all the way through TNG, they were doing all these miniature shots and all this, and, like, I mean, right off the bat, these guys are using a lot of CG to make this show, and they will throughout. And it goes to the fact that this was a network anchor. This was the network anchor for UPN. It wasn't syndicated.
Whoa, UPN!
So like their Paramount was trying to get into TV, and they were counting on this show being a BFD, and so they were sparing no expense. I mean, the sets look good. They carried over the uniforms from the DS9 era.
We'll get into uniforms later.
It all looks good. And
I got some beef there.
So our next scene starts.
Well, hold on. Before we jump off, so they've shown the biggest character. You got to consider these hero ships to be characters in the episode. In the episodes, what are your thoughts on Voyager, the Intrepid class?
Let's wait till we actually see the ship. Because we're still a couple scenes away from actually seeing the damn thing. Because the next scene cuts to an aerial shot of New Zealand, and says they're at a New Zealand penal colony. All right.
Federation penal colony. Open your mouth wide because here's a big pill to swallow.
And we focus back down to some people working in jumpsuits in a suspiciously Southern California looking climate.
No, that's New Zealand.
With a shot of Tom Paris, the baddest boy in the Federation. And let me tell you, if this is prison in the 24th century, it is the softest time that anyone could ask to do. It's like apparently we've evolved prison to be prison for white people, but now it's for everyone in the 24th century because this looks awesome. This looks like Club Med. This looks like a vacation.
Do we want to talk about Tom Paris as a character here real quick?
I mean, the apocrypha on this is pretty well known. Robert Duncan McNeil was a guest star in an episode of TNG when he played a cadet that was
Nicholas
Locarno was a cadet responsible for a terrible piloting accident that Wesley was involved in, and he basically tried to motherfuck everyone into lying about it. And everyone learns their lesson at the end, and he gets fucked over.
Except for him.
And they originally intended Tom Paris to be Nicholas Locarno, and played by the same guy, but they realized they'd have to pay royalties to the writers of that episode for every episode this character would appear in Voyager, so they instead made Tom Paris, who is a carbon copy of the same character, right down to a very similar backstory.
The big sell to the public was not they couldn't go forward like, well, we don't want to pay these old writers from some old TNG episodes, so they said that Nicholas was at his core unredeemable and bad, whereas they needed someone who had some warmer qualities and could be a hero.
I think there's a scene later on in the episode, and we'll get to it. When we'll discuss when we get to it, that sort of suggests the key alteration they made to his backstory to encompass that. But we get Tom Paris, get the hero shot of Tom, and the camera pans up, and we hear a female voice asking about
a gravelly,
deep, a deep voice,
raspy. That's always been the hard thing for me to get around Kate Mulgrew, man. That voice.
It befits a woman of command. She's got a voice that suggests she's done things with her life. That she's seen some shit. And the camera pans up, and there we have our intrepid captain, Catherine Janeway, asking to talk to him, and they have a Sorkin walk and talk, where Janeway says, "I knew your dad. I served on a ship with him," and Tom Paris is playing it too cool, too cool for school. Like, I guess that means I gotta talk to you because you're gonna, my parole officer said I have to, or something like that.
Here's my cockamamie reason for being here and trying to drag a felon on a very dangerous mission. Like, what? I'm really glad they put in that, she served with his dad. And do they ever flesh out, like, his dad put some real juice into trying to get Janeway into bailing this guy out of prison for some ridiculous search and destroy mission?
I don't recall that they ever address other than this issue, other than what Janeway says in this scene, which is, "Hey, Tom Paris, baddest man in the Federation, baddest boy. We were trying to find some Maquis terrorists, and hey, you were a Maquis terrorist." And he's like, "Yeah, but just for a couple weeks. I just part-timed, picked it up like as a side." Mm-hmm. He was like an Uber driver for them, just a little logged into the app, did a little terrorism, and then got busted like straight away. So he's like, what good am I to you? And he's like, well, you're better than anybody else we can find. It's like, something about them. So I'm looking for this ship because it's got my security chief on it, and it's got this guy we're looking for, Chakotay. And that gets Tom's attention.
Can we talk about the mission at this point?
Yeah.
So you got these Maquis who are quote-unquote unhappy, and they're causing problems, and the Cardassian empire of terror that was able to give the Federation a run for the money, where they had to come to an uneasy truce that can't seem to stomp these fucking Maquis out.
Right.
So the Federation's going to consider this a security issue. I want to talk about the ship assignment. The Intrepid is brand new. The Pathfinder ship was barely a year off of Utopia Planitia dry docks, or not dry docks, but space docks. So this thing's like brand new and is the epitome of Federation technology, right? I believe they classify the Intrepid and the Voyager as a long-range explorer vessel.
I mean, we see it here in the next shot. Like after the next shot we have is on a shuttlecraft.
A Type 6 shuttlecraft. I was very happy to see that.
Like the tiny one, with like a bunk bed in the back. In perhaps the greatest tragedy of the episode.
Of the series.
Just macking at maximum velocity on Lieutenant Satie, the helmswoman of Voyager, who's a parent.
The Betazoid helmswoman, the second hot Betazoid to be presented to the Star Trek viewer base.
She's a babe.
She wasn't. I thought she had solid acting.
She could.
Jobs.
We barely got to know anything about her, but Tom Paris got to know enough apparently, because he is trying hard to hit that a little too hard, a little too aggressive. So she's resisting his charms. But then they have the sort of hero reveal of the ship. And Voyager, like you said,
in case you weren't paying attention,
Voyager's got its, like you said, it's got that fresh coat of paint on it. It's factory fresh.
Looks like a throwing knife. I've always thought. What I'm going to say right up front: the movable pylons still stupid. I've never been able to get behind them. I think they look dumb. You've got the traditional Star Trek hero ship look, a saucer-like section, a deflector dish flanking nacelles, and again, it's Star Trek getting back in the saddle. One of the things that rubbed me the wrong way, I don't know, made me kind of question, was that Deep Space Nine being the one exception where it's the underdog facility, right?
It's not even a Federation facility. It's like a broken down old repurposed Cardassian space station.
It was a mining facility, I think. Star Trek's always focused, with the exception of Deep Space Nine, on some sort of a flagship, on some sort of a best of the best of the best, the best crew with the best technology and the best ship. And it's funny because when Voyager came out, they said, all right, this is the best ship in the fleet because TNG was out of production. This Intrepid beats out the Galaxy class, but only for a year before the Sovereign comes out. And you've got the Enterprise E back in the saddle as a number one. I always kind of wish that they had a space ship series that was like, hey, here's a B team, here's some guys that are just somewhere in the middle ranks that are doing, and I guess that's kind of the scratch that Orville
it's exactly what I was about to say. Like, I've also always wanted that. Like, I was talking to my wife about, like, I just always wanted to see, like, the job doers of the Federation, like, the dudes on, like, some Miranda class bucket who who are just getting the fucking job done, running weird ass cargo or taking VIPs from planet to planet or whatever. Like they're the fucking jabronis of the galaxy, just happy to be doing their part.
Which is exactly what brings me to this next, the topic I started hinting at. And it's like you've got a Federation minor security task where you've got some bullshit half-assed terrorists flying around in an El Camino, a space El Camino. That sounds like a Miranda or maybe like the Nebula class. That was like the Galaxy, like just some middle of the road, whatever, short range. Hey, go out find these guys.
They do establish why. Like the Voyager is a ship built to maneuver and to go fast, and so the whole point of why it's being sent is it can actually maneuver in the Badlands and all the Spawn level CGI plasma storms. Like this ship is built.
They didn't know it was
built to move. It looks like it's built to move. It's super high tech, but it's only got like 140 people on it and all this other stuff. So it's just a small little ship that can go and kind of dart around in there and find the fucking El Camino terrorists and haul their asses back out.
I don't know, man. I don't think that they really established that they knew they were going to be in the Badlands. I mean, you bring that in, it's like, okay, we need something a bit more maneuverable or whatever. But again, the Intrepid, class, the Voyager specifically, is a long-range exploration vehicle. I would think you've got some long-range exploration tasks to do, not some sort of multi-month project where the head of security is infiltrating a terrorist network for some long-term sting operation. It's a goofy fit for me.
Hey, look,
and it's a silly premise.
Star Trek is built on silly premises. We can go through TNG and
Sure.
find plenty. I can buy it. I can buy it at the level that they're offering it at the moment. And then we cut next to a scene actually on DS9.
Well, hold on, yeah. I mean, we Voyager is docked at DS9, and just like DS9 got its launch off with some sort of a TNG import. I mean, they had Patrick Stewart on hand to hand the keys over to Cisco. I figured we were going to get some of that and get some Cisco time in here, and instead we get better. We get
Quark. So we cut to Quark's bar. We get our first shot of Ensign Harry Kim, who is playing the part of like fresh academy graduate on his first day of the job.
Asian overachiever,
a classic Asian overachiever, and he's
playing.
Getting sold by Quark to buy some mementos for his doting mom and dad, who we will hear about endlessly over the next 7 years. And Armin Shimmerman, I love Quark. I love Quark on DS9, and it's kind of striking how much better an actor he is than most of the people we have seen so far.
Circles around these guys, man. It was such a painful scene, and like I pause it and I'm like, this guy is awesome. She's like, oh, does he get to be around a lot? And I'm like, no, I think this is like one of the few times you even get Ferengi. I would say Ferengi are certainly the most historically interesting out of any of the Star Trek races. For the lascivious, shameless racial stereotypes that they started off on TNG. Shimmerman actually playing one of the first that you're ever introduced to. They go from these fur-clad savage creatures into space bankers, essentially.
Yeah, my wife, a little less sensitive, was like, are they supposed to be space Jews? Because they seem like they're being portrayed as space Jews.
Well, they absolutely, and what you're getting there is like a polished final product. The origin was so much worse. And he throws a pretty good line, and there's like, what do you mean, warned about the Ferengi at the Federation?
So Harry, has this knowing smile, like that, like, oh, you're going to try and swindle me. And he, lets drop, like, we were warned about Ferengi at the Academy. And Quark picks up on that immediately and starts making it a whole, like, oh, you're all space racist in the Federation now, huh? Hold on, let me get your name, let me get your badge number. I'm going to call your supervisor, to try and guilt the guy into buying, some of his junk. And fortunately for Harry, baddest boy in the Federation, Tom Paris, has watched this whole thing, dispassionately with coffee in hand, and then just sort of rolls up and is like,
swaggers
and
over
points
there.
out it's all junk, and that you could buy it at any fucking Family Dollar in the Alpha Quadrant. And
because he knows so much about the this region of space that he's very familiar with their dollar store trinkets. But the callback to we were warned about the Ferengi, like, it's still this weird, like, at this point they fleshed the Ferengi out so well. There's so much interaction with them and everything in the Deep Space Nine. Where TNG it started off like the Ferengi were this big unknown. They were supposed to be like built out to be the biggest rivals to the Federation, and basically took a role, or were supposed to take a role that the Romulans would later, I think, really encapsulate better.
Agreed.
But it's still like, I don't know. Like, do you know what the Ferengi are? Do you not know what the Ferengi are? What's going on back in San Francisco? What's going on back at the Academy? Why is there so much wonderment and mystery about these creatures?
Well, maybe just the instructors are anti-Semitic, dude. Or whatever, space anti-Semitic. Our next scene, we cut back to the first shot on Voyager.
I was very sad to see that scene wrap. I would have liked more.
Same here. I mean, it was kind of unfair. DS9 got this very loving handoff from TNG. The Enterprise was there. Picard had a couple scenes.
They rebuilt the bridge from scratch because they had already torn it up.
They did all this stuff to really show the passing of the torch. complete with this like shot of like Picard leaving as Cisco like cements his command. The whole backstory of Cisco is really tied up in Picard and Battle of Wolf 359 and the Locutus episode and all that. And then for DS9, they basically just shove Voyager out the airlock. They're like, go fly, little bird. Like, you just get this one scene that they happen to be here, like fucking fueling up the ship, right? Like they're getting the unleaded and they're just they're topping it off before they head into the fucking Badlands, and that's it. They're out. They're gone. Fucking DS9 might as well just be a speedway.
And yeah, essentially, I mean, I would think that Cisco having a sit down with Janeway to go over what the Voyager's mission was moving forward would have been a much better introduction to the ship and the premise and the Maquis and everything else.
It could have built into the explanation like you were wanting of why it is Voyager's out here doing this, and it could have been like something Cisco told them, or Dax, or Kira, or anybody else, in a position of authority on the, or even I guess Worf wouldn't join this show for another season, but the point is that they didn't do much with it. There was just this one scene of Quark trying to space Jew Harry Kim, and then it's over. And now we're on Voyager, and we get a nice scene with unnamed character. I'm just going to call him Dr. Butthole. It's just the physician who does an impressive...
it's going to die. He has
an impressive one scene, because he gives off that hostility, that hostility vibe, with his body language without overplaying it. He has his dialogue. None of it's overtly aggressive, but yet is able to perfectly portray his contempt for Tom Paris. And that's it. This is the only speaking lines this guy has on the whole series. Dr. Butthole has one glorious moment, and they go off to talk to Captain Janeway.
I was excited about this because, obviously I know enough about the series that I know who's going to be replaced by new figures. So the first officer, the doctor... knowing that they were going to be speed bumps to what would become the finalized crew, I was balls deep in these scenes, like just looking for anything. Like, how crappy to get cast for Star Trek and being like, all right, awesome, cool, and then being like, oh, but you're a one-shot throwaway character.
You die in the first
series. To the series credit, though, since they reuse actors so heavily, hey, first officer today, maybe you'll be the head of some major rival empire.
That's true.
Tomorrow.
With enough,
welcome to
like latex on your forehead, you can be anybody.
On your nose. Oh yeah.
So we get our first scene Janeway sort of in the role as captain, but before that, she's having a conversation with her man. Probably the best acting in the whole episode is her having a very naturalistic relationship conversation with her fiance Mark about her dog being pregnant. So apparently, you did not follow Bob Barker's advice. This pet was not spayed nor neutered. Taking care of her dog while she's off chasing white trash terrorists, and you can tell she was much more, like, Kate Mulgrew as an actor was much more comfortable with this scene because it's more like what she's done in the past than anything else she had to do in this episode. She obviously grew into having to do all of this Star Trek sci-fi technobabble stuff, but this scene she didn't have to do any of that. She was very comfortable.
I have not put a lot of thought in about Captain Janeway, but looking back, how many years?
22 years
at this point. Looking back 22 years, let's turn on the SJW sunglasses and all that other stuff. I liked everything I saw out of her this episode. You look at the previous couple starship captains we've had, Kirk, Cavalier Playboy, Picard, hard as nails. Cisco was kind of a taskmaster too. Her coming in with the soft lead, especially in private, because all the other captains, what you saw on the bridge is what you were seeing in the ready room for the most part. Her having this business and personal two different faces, I think it worked. I think
they set the tone perfectly well. Like, I completely agree. Like, it was here's a natural conversation of her, living her life, and it's very like normal. And she's got emotions, and
And she doesn't live in space,
Yeah.
which that's kind of another weird thing. So you've got, again, the Voyager, a deep space exploration vehicle, and then you've got someone who's got a dog on Earth. Like, it seems like she's a Monday through Friday on the ship, and then I live, I have my life back on Earth. I'm not a career is everything captain.
Which was kind of different. And then you got Paris and Kim. They come in, and she's in captain mode. And we get our brief explanation of gender pronoun address in Starfleet. So they follow the old naval tradition that everyone is referred to as sir, as a superior officer, man or woman, which is the case in real life. Janeway says, "I know that's the regulation. I actually don't like that." He tries ma'am. He's like, "No, actually, that's for special occasions. Just call me captain."
Is them talking? I think that's them talking to the audience.
Yeah,
really.
I mean, like, it's interesting that they spent a moment to establish that. Like, I appreciate that level of detail.
So one of the pieces of technology that I always have a hard time with, I love it, and then I hate it until we get to an episode that focuses on it, and it's the holodeck. These guys that are getting transferred on, especially like bridge crew, like, hey, I'm a fresh transfer. Okay, this is where you're going to be working. Like, yeah, I know. I ran like countless simulations on how operations on an Intrepid class works. Like, these people walking like, oh, this is my first day on the job. I've never seen any of this stuff before. Like, you live in a world of holodecks. How does everybody not have like extensive training into whatever job they're going to be going into?
I mean, I guess that's exactly what happens, though. Kim's credit, he launches right into work. He doesn't need to be told how to do anything. They start in on their mission. And next scene is down at the lunchroom, Federation lunchroom, half warmed over pot of coffee next to the replicators. Tom Paris trying to get himself some fucking tomato soup up in this bitch.
And acting like he doesn't know what replicators taste like.
Yeah, like, oh, it's so terrible, replicator food, this magical substance that comes out of nowhere.
I'm bad boy Tom Paris, and I'm so excited. And the best he's going to come up with is fucking the most boring thing possible, tomato soup. Like, come on, dude. Get some synthahol. Show us what a badass you are.
Yeah, I know, right? Like, where's your fucking secret supply for Romulan ale? If anybody on this ship's going to sneak aboard some hooch, you would hope it would be the baddest boy in the Federation. But
you know what? Hold on a second here. I'm thinking in my head of the scene, and it's the first officer, and it's Dr. Asshole.
Yeah, it's
telling Ensign Kim what's up. I'm going to search it right now. I bet you $5. I think that guy who was the doctor, wasn't that Roga Dinar from TNG? He was like that genetically engineered super soldier that like fucked Data and Worf up, and then...
Oh, like from that episode where it was like Farmer Haggett was the head of this planet or something? The guy from Babe?
Jeff McCarthy. Come on, Internet, go. It totally is him!
Oh, nice!
I fucking... That's why I like that guy so much. That's straight up Roga Dinar, man.
Oh, wow, yeah. I just pulled it up, too. That's fucking hilarious that you spotted that.
He fucked everybody up on the Enterprise, man.
Oh, yeah.
That guy was like, he's arguably the baddest motherfucker in the universe.
I mean, he straight up, like, went on the, like, deadliest prey style stalking, like, through a Galaxy-class starship for an entire episode.
Yeah, so there you go. Again, one episode you're a throwaway dead crewmate, and on another episode you could be the center of attention. So good on Jeff McCarthy.
Well, Dr. Butthole and First Officer, I think it's Cabot. We'll go, whatever. Doesn't matter. Gonna die in like the next scene.
Not gonna matter anymore.
They're having a Soto Vase conversation with Harry Kim, who looks ashen, and it's clearly about Bad Boy Tom. So they leave as Bad Boy Tom approaches, and Tom sits down. He knows this conversation's happened. He's bad news. That's what they're saying. He's a bad boy. You don't want to hang out with him. He lives across the Federation tracks. And we get the explanation you alluded to earlier about the change they made to his backstory. So we learn from Tom's narration that he was involved in a piloting accident, and it was his fault. And he had lied about what happened to escape blame, and he would have gotten away with it, but he actually decided to come clean simply because he was tortured by his conscience. So instead of trying to get a whole bunch of people to lie for him, he killed everybody. He was able to lie about what happened, but then just felt bad and then came clean and therefore got kicked out of Starfleet.
So, things get underway, and we get to the point where, the Voyager goes into the Badlands. They're scanning around. They're looking, and then this omnipresent wave starts coming at them, and their best efforts to thwart it fail. There's something very unnatural about this thing, and they get hit. This, for me, was my biggest letdown of the episode here. Well, I would say it's probably the second biggest. The pinnacle event in forging what Voyager is going to be about is the process of getting knocked a galaxy away. They get hit by this thing. There's nothing that it was such an unimpressive accident.
It was just a white flash.
Was it even a flash?
Yeah.
I mean, it looked like they just hit something. There's some jostling. I mean, we're talking about something that even with full, hey, brace for impact, kills tons of crew members.
Well, I mean, the first officer, idiot, dramatically runs into the middle of the bridge so he can have that moment right before the flash that he is completely unprotected. But yeah, everyone's conveniently dead when they come to. That is required for the story. Janeway's hair is perfectly messed, but otherwise she's fine.
No. Her hair is a mess.
I mean, it's perfectly a mess, though. It's still framing her face, even though it's messed up.
Yeah.
But
she fixes it before she's even off the transport. I thought that was funny, but yeah, I mean, there's no visual thing that the Voyager has been moved or thrown. It's just hey, we hit something, and there's a bunch of dead people and wires all over the place, and one of the biggest accidents we've ever seen in Star Trek history, done on the shoestring budget. It was bad.
And so we've got
the biggest tragedy.
Yeah.
Laying at the floor, our helm's officer.
Yeah, Lieutenant Sati is dead. Rest in peace, Hadi Betazoid. The first officer's dead. They can't get any response back from sick bay. We get a radio call up from engineering that says the engineering chief, who we never even saw, is dead.
That was one of my big notes I had underlined. I'm like, gee, you couldn't find any sort of an extra and just be here, you get to be chief engineer for 2 minutes.
Yeah,
completely off screen.
Just off screen, dead, never saw, never. And Harry Kim's freaking out, and why is he freaking out? Because according to his star charts, they are 70,000 light years from their first location. They are on the other side of the galaxy. And we see on the view screen this big space station that's shooting this white laser at something. So clearly this thing is responsible in some way. So we see a lot of panic on the part of the crew. Janeway rushes down to engineering because she's got to make sure the fucking warp core doesn't fucking blow up on her first day in command or whatever. And Harry Kim...
And the series takes another turning point, where we've gone from one of the biggest letdowns, which was that half-ass accident, to the introduction of what I would say is, at this point, my favorite character.
Oh, and by far the most interesting one as the series goes on, because Harry and Tom, they go down to sickbay because clearly they've got a bunch of injuries. They got to figure out what the fuck is going on. They find that, conveniently, both the doctor and the nurse, Dr. Bubble,
R.I.P. Rogadamar,
are dead, because they were standing next to a suspiciously explosive console. And so they're completely blown
Big problem
away.
with those neural gel packs.
And so they have to activate the emergency medical hologram, and thus out of nothing manifests Robert Picardo as just an asshole, stereotypical doctor who shows up to start trying to treat patients and treat everyone like garbage.
100% hollow sass.
Could not give a shit about everyone's problems. He tells people with obvious wounds, well, you're not going to die, so get the fuck out of here. You don't have a concussion, you can return to your station. He doesn't give a shit. He's eager to be turned off. It's this thing. You need to find some people to replace me. I don't want to be on for very long. I've got my I've got my life to live in the computer banks. Yeah. I don't want any fucking part of your drama.
When Reginald Barclay programmed this guy, his prime directive, number one, is to watch that clock.
It's
5 p.m. can't come soon enough, man. This guy wants out.
He just does not want to be on. He wants to be off as much as possible. He does not want to be doing things if he doesn't have to. It's awesome.
So now, we've got a pretty solid Star Trek story up to this point. I know I've been pooping on it pretty hard, but you've got a TNG franchise friendly situation. You've got the Cardassian hostilities, you got the Maquis, you've gone on to a dangerous area, pursuing them, and what the making of a great pilot here. Where are the Maquis? What is going to happen? What are you going to do about all these dead officers? You got a really good central story. And instead of pursuing that and really fleshing it out and giving you things that people care about, they jam in this goddamn caretaker Ocampo plot.
Oh, God. You know what? Let's pause here, because this is only the first 25 minutes of the episode, and it definitely had the most interesting shit happening in it, which is why I think we've spent about an hour talking about it.
Yes.
And then the remaining fucking hour and 20 minutes of this episode is just a slow descent of all of the things that started interesting not paying off. So join us for the next part of our discussion of Caretaker.